This video is an excerpt from our SR Lounge premium workshops. To learn more or purchase, simply go to srlounge.com/store. My name is Pi and enjoy the video. Backlight plus gobo plus fog equals magically awesome deliciousness, which I said earlier. Okay, so in this tutorial, we're basically going to be combining several of the different techniques that we've talked about up until this point. We're going to be putting the flash behind the subject. We're going to be putting a gobo between the subject and the flash. We're going to be adding fog. We're going to use a certain pose that's going to bring out her silhouette. And then we're going to use our in-camera exposure settings while balancing flash power to basically kill ambient light and create our interesting silhouette shots. So let's go ahead and talk through this. Now for composition and attributes, we're placing the pin board on a C-stand. So we just got this pin or pegboard, whatever you want to call it. We got it from Home Depot. Very inexpensive stuff, $5 or $10 for one of these boards. And then we just spray painted it black. Okay, so we have that, and we place that up on a C-stand, basically attached to it securely, so it's not going to drop or fall or anything like that. And we placed it behind the subject, and we're just shooting in a hotel room. You could do this literally anywhere, any indoor scene, you could totally do this. You just need to make sure that you don't have tons of ambient light, otherwise you won't be able to cut it away to get to this point unless you're using heavy powered strobes. Now anywhere between f2 and f2.8 is basically our desired aperture just for depth of field. I want to have a little bit of blur and separation between the pegboard and between the subject and kind of have these light rays that are streaking through and so forth, but for that to be not completely sharp. So that gives us that look. It also gives us sync. We're shooting indoors, so we can sync easily. We don't have a ton of light in the scene. So we're at 1/200 of a second, which is totally fine. And that gives us an ability to basically cut away ambient light too by leaving it at 1/200 of a second, f2.8-ish. And then for ISO, we're at around 200 ISO for these shots. So if you look, we have a shot over here just with our ambient light. We're shooting these images, by the way, on the Canon 85mm 1.2L. Since then, I actually got the 85 Sigma. This is not their art lens, but it's still another fantastic option. So if you don't have, or if you can't afford the 85 1.2, the Canon side, then this is probably the next best 85 that you're gonna be able to get. And then if you can't, I think this is priced a little bit above the Canon 85 1.8. So there's another 85 that's even less expensive. I think it's around 400 bucks. But all you need is, I mean, any lens in this situation will do. You just need a lens that's a little bit tight, simply so that you can make the that pin or pegboard your entire background. So you just need to be able to zoom in a little bit to be able to make that fill the background. So you can see over here that at 1/30 of a second, f1.4, ISO 1600, we can see basically what the ambient exposure is. And you can see based on that exposure that the ambient light has been cut away pretty dramatically. Like we've closed the curtains in the place. We don't have a lot of ambient light, just enough basically to get focus, but that's it. So this is ambient light only, flash not fired. So what are we doing? Well, we already talked about basically placing the flash behind the subject, right? So the light direction is coming from behind. We're using the magmod grid on that flash to prevent the flash from spilling out and hitting the walls. Now, if that light spills out and hits the walls, it's not necessarily a big deal, right? If it hits the walls, it's fine. That's not in our composition. So why do we care to put a grid on there? The reason for that is that if the light spills around and hits walls basically on my right and on my left and behind me, it's going to bounce into our subject. And if it bounces into our subject, then we no longer have essentially a silhouetted shot, right? We would have detail there, and we want a silhouette. So we grid it to control that light to make sure that it just only hits that gobo and it doesn't really bounce everywhere. Okay, so the gobo is placed. Again, remember when we talked about using gobos that the shape and size of the light that's coming through is going to be dependent on number one, the flash distance to the gobo, and number two, the gobo distance to the subject, okay? We talked about that earlier, we demonstrated earlier, so I'm not going to go too far into that. Just know that those distances are going to control the amount of shape and the definition of the light that's coming through. Okay, let's go ahead and on our test shot, you can see the bottom left shot, we basically cut away our ambient light right here. So we're at 1/200 of a second, f2.8, ISO 200. I dropped the Kelvin. So we were at 6,000 degrees Kelvin. I dropped it to 3,800 degrees because I wanted like a cool blue kind of vibe to it. Although this would look cool in other color temperatures, I thought it looked really nice and nifty at that point. We have our Photix Metros Plus with our magmod grid on it, and we're shooting roughly around 1/4 to 1/8 power for all these shots. And I think for this particular shot, we might have been a little bit higher. And then what do we do? Oh yeah, so when we drop down to f2, so some of these shots were taken at f2, most of them were at f2.8, but when I dropped to f2, I lowered the power setting on the MagMod, or on the Photex Mitros to 1/8 to 1/16 power. Again, it's scenes like this that make, you know, whenever we put this inside of a softbox, whenever we're putting it behind the subjects, whenever it's at a distance, it's times like that where it's really nice and convenient just to be able to control my power settings directly from my Odin or directly from the other Mitros, whatever I put on my camera to control. So radio flash power control is absolutely fantastic, and it's something that's been long overdue in my opinion. Okay, once we have that shot, basically everything is set up. All we gotta do is, well, we talked about, we dropped our white balance to get this nice blue tone, and now it's just posing, framing, and shooting. So we're framing the shot to fill the background with a pegboard, and then we're just shooting these images with the body in different types of silhouetted poses. So what we're trying to do is we're using the profile, the form of the body to create these shots, and bending the back and arching the back, using limbs and protruding them just to create depth and space in the shot, right? Because if my limbs, let's say for example, if I'm facing the camera like this and you fire a profile shot or you fire a silhouetted shot, all you see is just my head shape, but you don't see any of the face shape. So you need me to actually turn profile, and then once you fire that background to make me a silhouette, then you can actually see shape here. Same thing with the hands. If the hands are placed against my body right now, you don't see any space and shape there. So I need to move the hands out into different positions so that when you fire, you can actually see that space and it gives the image form. So you need me to arch my back, you need me to do awesome stuff like this, right? Wasn't that cool? Okay. Logan liked it. He's in the background right there. I can see him smiling. Don't get too excited, buddy. Okay, so we do a couple different shots here. Now, to be honest, I would have, you know, kept shooting with this setup, but we had a lot of other shots to shoot. And also, you know, my model was a little bit apprehensive about shooting these just with her essentially nude, because she's basically topless at this point. So I didn't want to keep her in that position for too long. She was cool with it. She didn't have any objections for it, but it wasn't like she wanted to just keep shooting these all day long. So I shot a couple images mainly just to show you guys how cool of an effect you can get when you're doing it on your own. Take the time to set it up and to do everything right so you get beautiful silhouettes, you get an amazing looking image, but always, you know, work within your model's kind of comfort zone. You never want to push your model beyond the point that they want to be, and you never want to push them on set, okay? So you always kind of ask, is it okay if we do this type of a shot? If they say yes or no, you just, you know, either do it or you move on based on their answer. So that's it for the shot. Remember that when we set up this flash in the background, this is again where studio lights are really helpful for shots like this because they have modeling lights built in. When you don't have a modeling light and these flashes placed behind, remember to use that little test button on your camera off to the side so that you can fire that kind of pulse for about a half second to a second to get an idea of where you want to place the flash and how you want the streaks to look. For these shots, I was placing the flash right about where her head was, just so that the brightest point in the shot would be where her head and that kind of area was. So we're going for basically neck to head area was the placement. All right, that's it for this image. Let's go ahead and move to the next one now.